Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Long-Term Care Then and Now. My name is Jennifer Howard, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before I introduce today's speakers, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, hopefully all of you can hear us. You'll see a chat icon on your screen. Please send us a message from that chat area if you're having any problems. A reminder that all attendees will be muted, but you will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's speakers by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them at the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce today's speakers, Jim Cunningham and Christina Lindsey Orta. Jim is the CEO of Cunningham Legal, an estate planning and trust administration law firm with 9 offices around California. Christina is the president of Ascent Wealth Management and is a certified financial planner and a fiduciary. She and her team do comprehensive financial planning that is custom tailored to an individual's estate plan. Today, Jim and Christina are going to discuss the very important topic of long-term care planning and how you can prepare both legally and financially. Jim is going to begin the presentation, and with that, I will hand things off to him.
Well, thanks, Jennifer, for that great introduction. And Christina and I work very closely with many clients. We've been able to help many clients with specifically long-term care as well as other issues. But today we're going to focus on what I think is probably one of the most important things to consider as we age. One of the most important things to consider that your other family members should consider for you, that you should consider for your loved ones. We're going to talk about what long-term care used to be and what it is now. We're also going to talk about, I'll cover the legal documents that you should consider when you plan for the aging process. We'll talk about levels of care. And yes, we will also talk about how to pay for that care. And we all know that long-term care is very expensive. And the last figure I heard was about 80% of people will have a period of disability before death. And oftentimes this requires having some assistance as we age. And then we're going to talk about, Christina will talk about long-term care insurance. And, you know, Christina, the reason I put a question mark on there is that's the question I get. People ask me, Jim, is this something I should consider? And the answer is yes, you should consider it. Now, whether you actually go ahead and do it, that's a one-on-one conversation to have with an appropriate professional. But I put the question there because that is a topic that we'll talk about. And then we'll round it out with some Q&A. Before we get started, it's very important for you guys to understand that Cunningham Legal, we're a law firm. I'm a lawyer. I'm talking, but this is not legal advice, okay? Just because I'm a lawyer and just because I'm talking, don't just run out and take action on this, okay? It's very important that this is just purely information only. And I'll start with, you know, putting some context here. This is my great-grandmother on her wedding day, and I believe that was 1910. And she was 25 years old. It was actually, she got married on her 25th birthday. And she died in 1979, listening to her favorite radio show in the afternoon. So a very peaceful way to go. Lived independently her whole life. And when her time came, she went. My grandmother had a heart attack and was on a ventilator, and this was about 20 years ago. And she was in the hospital for about a week. Now, she didn't have long-term care, but with obviously the advances in medical care, they were able to keep her going for a little bit longer. Now, my own mother, statistically speaking, will probably spend 4 to 10 years in a nursing home, frankly, because of advances in healthcare. So it used to be that people would, at the end of their life, would get sick and pass away. And now what we're seeing as people age, as medical science advances, that we really have to start thinking about, hey, who's going to take care of me because I'm living longer than my ancestors did, and how are we going to pay for it?
Great, Jim. This is a good time to launch our first pop up on your screen. The question is, are you currently interested in long-term care for a parent, a spouse or partner, yourself, or not applicable? Please go ahead and take the next 15 seconds to make your selection, and then we will go ahead and share those results. Okay, it looks like most of you have responded. We're going to go ahead and give you guys another 5 seconds or so. Okay, we're going to share those results, and as you can see, you're looking for yourself, and that's very important. Jim, you know, I'm sure you can speak to that right now.
Yeah, it's so important, and I'll tell you why. Not only are we living longer, not only is the need greater, but I will tell you, folks, in the real world, there is a shortage of caregivers, and this is a really big problem. You know, I mentioned my great-grandmother, I mentioned my grandmother. My wife is caring for her parents right now, and just before we started on the webcast, we're moving her parents from one facility to another, and she says, Jim, I'm going to email you this stuff. Can you print out these 60 pages that we have to go through and sign to get my parents into their new facility? And I will tell you, my wife, this is adding a tremendous amount of stress in her life. You know, we only have so much headspace for so many things, and we've got kids, they're getting through college and getting out of college, and you know, this is a great time. I just recently turned 50. So the kids are kind of out of the house. We're empty nesters. It's a great time. And then my wife is also caring for her parents. And the real stress, the point of stress, or a big point of stress for my wife, she's really worried that her parents are going to outlive their money. She's really worried that the cost of their care will not only does it take up more than their income, but it's going to consume their entire savings. And then the question becomes, well, what happens when my parents run out of money? What do we do? And these costs in California, the average is $9,337 a month per person. So if you're married, you 2x that. That's the average cost. Now, this is the average cost in a skilled nursing care facility, and the prices do range, or the charges for the facilities do range. Christina is going to talk about that. But the point is, it's a lot of money. My in-laws are spending about $5,000 or $6,000 more per month on their care than is coming in. And my in-laws did not buy long-term care insurance. And I can tell you, had my in-laws bought long-term care insurance, that the stress level would be greatly reduced for my wife. So let's talk about plan and documents to consider. So your estate plan. So if you're a client of our firm, there's a 99.9% probability you have a living trust-centered estate plan, which typically includes these documents and a few other documents. So I'm just going to touch on these. A durable power of attorney. That is a document that says I give somebody else the ability to sign agreements on my behalf, access IRAs, 401ks, file tax returns. So right now, my mother-in-law can't do for herself, so to speak. So my wife has that role. My wife is the one who's signing agreements and tax returns for my mother-in-law. Advanced Healthcare Directive. That says who makes healthcare decisions for you. Very important. That is a legal document that you sign before you get sick. And my wife is the one who makes healthcare decisions for her mother. Hipaa Authorization. You guys remember this for those of you who are clients of us. The Hipaa Authorization is the medical privacy document. So that allows people that you name in that document to have access to your health information. Because Christina, if I go down to your physician, Christina, how many months pregnant are you right now?
I am 8 months pregnant.
8 months pregnant. So there's someone who's going to live into the 21st century swimming around in your belly, I guess. But if I go down to your doctor and I ask, hey, give me Christina's health information, they're not going to give it to me. I need a Hipaa authorization. So that's the authorization to access confidential medical information. And that's what that CMIA is, that Confidential Medical Information Act.
And Jim, doesn't the Hipaa have to be updated every 5 years?
Yeah, you know what? There's on many Hipaa documents, there is an expiration. So you're going to want to pay attention to that and look at that. A living will. Again, I'm just going through these. The healthcare directive says who makes healthcare decisions for you. The Hipaa authorization gives access to confidential medical information. The living will says, if I'm a goner, let me go. If it's my time, I give permission to my kids, in many instances, to, and I'll put this in air quotes, to pull the plug. And I'll tell you what, guys, those of you who are listening in today, if you try and have this conversation with your children, I mean, just imagine we say, hey, you know, son or daughter, when I'm gone, if I'm a goner, pull the plug. Your kids do not want to have that conversation with you. Now, your spouse, they might want to have that conversation with you. I don't know, right? But and a little joke there. But your kids, definitely the kids don't want to have that conversation. And then a living trust is the document that deals with your property. So it's very important to pay attention. How often should these be updated? You know, a general rule of thumb is 3 years. If it's been more than 3 years since your estate plan has been updated, I encourage you to reach out to us, and we can do a review for you at no charge to make sure that you're all set up. So we've talked about how stressful it is. Remember how stressful it is for my wife taking care of her parents. We've talked about getting your estate plan set up. Well, let's say you do all of this stuff. You get your estate plan set up, and then you wait. You wait for, I mean, I hate to be Johnny Raincloud on this, but you wait for the stroke, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. Something happens, and remember, it happens 80% of the time. You're going to have a period of disability before death. So very important to consider the information that that we're going over here with you today. Levels of care. You can see, for those of you, hopefully you can see the screen here. There's in-home care, independent living. They can be similar type scenarios. Boarding care is a step up. Memory care is a step up. Custodial care in a skilled nursing care facility. And then respiratory care in a skilled nursing facility. We have 2 clients that have dementia and COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. It's a descriptor for a lot of pulmonary diseases. It is $30,000 a month for one person in a facility per month for those people with COPD and dementia. And that is all private pay, guys. Pretty scary. So who pays for it? Well, this is in the real world. This is actual data. Medicare pays a very small amount, and you can't rely on Medicare. It's an extremely limited benefit. When my mother-in-law fell and broke her hip, she's 87. We elected not to do surgery because you can't, she's got dementia, and you just, frankly, the physician said you really shouldn't be putting someone under general who's got dementia who's 87. So she went through rehab. When she was in rehab at a skilled nursing care facility, Medicare covered that, and the reimbursement rate runs about $800 or so. Medicare covers that until she plateaued. You may have heard of plateau. What is plateau? Well, plateau means you're not getting any better. So what do? They kick you out of that Medicare facility because the facility has a lot of nursing, has a lot of cost associated with it, and they need that $800 a day to cover their expenses. And if you're plateauing, you have a different level of care. Well, they end up moving you to a different facility, typically, and you private pay. So, and Medicare's capped at 100 days a year, and that resets every January 1. Medicaid, in California, it's called Medi-Cal. That's healthcare for poor people. There are 100,000 people in the state of California today in skilled nursing care facilities that receive some form of Medi-Cal. But if you're single, you can only have $2,000 in assets. You have to be poor. If you're married, you can have a little bit more. The vast majority of people you can see here, 50% out of pocket.
So we have a question, a good question from an attendee named Clint, who is asking, doesn't Medicare pay for long-term care costs?
The answer,
I'll answer that,
yeah.
Jim, too. So they do cover short-term stays. So if you spend 30 days in a hospital, they'll cover those 30 days. And then if you move from the hospital to a nursing care facility for rehab, as Jim was mentioning, they will then cover up to 20 days of nursing care. On day 21, your out-of-pocket is $170 per day. And then after 100 days total, the patient is responsible for 100% of the care. So Medicare does not cover true long-term care needs.
Great. Thank you so much. Jim, you can continue.
Yeah, so, you got to pay for it. This means you have to write a check. The money has to come from somewhere, right? It's got to come from your pocket. Do you sell a rental property? Well, what happens if you sell a rental property? Many people will pay capital gains tax, right? You might pay a big lump of capital gains tax. So, well, that may not be so good. Well, if you take money out of your IRA, you have to pay taxes on that typically. Well, you may have a deduction for, if your medical expenses are a certain number. But the point is, you need some type of plan for paying for the actual care. And many people, frankly, don't have a plan, and it kind of falls on the kids to take care of that. And that can be a really difficult task. Imagine you've got a kid taking care of a parent, and then you got to heap on the added stress of, well, where does the money come from? So I want to talk briefly about Medi-Cal benefits. Medi-Cal benefits, there's a quality of care issue, and I think most people would say, gee, Medi-Cal, Medicaid sounds like substandard care. I'm not convinced that it's necessarily substandard care. I think that's a belief that a lot of people have. But here's something that's really important. You have to qualify medically, number one, which is, stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. And you have to qualify financially, meaning you have to be poor. So if you qualify medically and you qualify financially, you then have to determine your benefit, which is how much is the state going to cover your nursing home bill. And I got some news for you. If you go on Medi-Cal and you have income, you have to give all of that income to the nursing home minus $35. And then the state pays the rest. So on a $9,300 a month bill, if your income's $3,000 a month, you pay your $2,900 and change, and then the state picks up the balance. So I'm not convinced that relying on Medi-Cal is a really good strategy for long-term care. So what are, order of liquidation, we talked about, do you sell the rental property? Do you pay from savings? Where does the money come from? And this is a very tough question. And this is a great time to turn it over to Christina. And Christina's helped out a lot of our clients with long-term care insurance, and she's going to go through some very exciting strategies that are out there. And, every situation is different. I think every client situation is different. And so you've got some great examples to go over, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
We do. Thank you, Jim. Well, I wanted to start by kind of addressing that this is a number one concern of retirees entering retirement. Over 30% of retirees say that this is their top concern is long-term care expenses. Healthcare expenditures and long-term care in particular have an inflation rate of 6 to 8% a year. So it is a very valid concern for retirees. And so what is long-term care? And I know that we spoke about all the different levels of care, but when do you become eligible for the need of care? And it's when you when you cannot perform two of the activities of daily living. And that means bathing, eating, dressing, going to the bathroom. The other things that are automatic qualifiers for long-term care are Alzheimer's or dementia. Many of the policies today, it's when your doctor is stating that you're in need of care. Some of the older policies used to require the insurance company's evaluator to determine if you needed care, but today it's if your doctor determines that you need care. So that's where long-term care insurance does come into play, is when you have a couple of the ADLs or you have Alzheimer's or dementia. And then we have a Wall Street Journal article just speaking to how long-term care insurance is really an estate planning tool. And so with the estate planning, as Jim had mentioned, there's many documents that are required for factoring long-term care and making sure that you have a Hipaa authorization and all of those things. As far as what Jim had also mentioned is that there's a shortage of caregivers in certain markets. And one of the things having a long-term care insurance policy does is it establishes a care coordinator to work with your durable power of attorney for healthcare, to work with that representative that's helping you navigate this process, whether it be a spouse, a child, a successor trustee. But this is very much an estate planning tool. And I know my mother is going through this personally with her mother. So my grandmother in upstate New York, there is an extreme shortage of caregivers. And she could have qualified for a long-term care policy a couple of years ago prior to her falling. And she just did not want to take out a policy. And now they're probably going to spend every dime of her estate, and they're having a terrible time getting caregivers. And so had she had this policy, she probably would have had a care coordinator.
This is because Christina, you're going to be talking about this in the following slides. This is a good time to launch our next poll. The question is, are you afraid of outliving your money? The response options are yes, no, I don't know, or I haven't thought about it. Please take the next 15 seconds or so and we will share the results. Okay, their responses are quickly coming in. We're just going to give it a few more seconds. Wow, we're very even on this one. Okay, we're going to end the polling and share the results, and it looks like yes edged it out narrowly. Christina, back over to you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, the fastest growing sector of clients is centenarians. We now have over a dozen clients that are over the age of 100. And what we do with all of our retirement plans is we do every retirement plan taking the youngest spouse, if it's a married couple, out to age 95. And sometimes clients laugh and they go, I'm not going to live that long. But I got to tell you, people are living longer and medicine is continuing to improve. And so this is also increasing the amount of years people are in need of care because care has gotten better. So if we look at the numbers, by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. 58% of men over 65 will need some form of long-term care, and 7 in 10 people over the age of 65 will need some long-term care at some point in their life. The overwhelming majority of people that end up needing care are women. Women on average outlive men 7 years. And the average long-term care need, as far as the average duration of a claim, is 4.3 years. So back to Jim's original cost projection of over $9,000 a month, that's in today's dollars for 4.3 years. That could really harm one spouse. If you have one spouse that needs care, it could leave the other spouse with a lot less assets in retirement. So that's why we do want to make sure we look at long-term care, because the question is, where are you going to pull that first $125,000 that it costs for that first year of care? Where are you going to pull that from? You don't want to sell the rental house, as Jim mentioned, because then you're going to have capital gains. So what we can do with long-term care insurance is leverage an insurance company's dollars. The question I often get asked is, why not self-insure? Why can I not just cover this cost myself? I have significant assets in my retirement. I can probably afford to pay for this out of pocket. Well, I have a couple clients that have parents that have been in a care facility over 10 years. Jim and I have a mutual client in Placerville up in Northern California, and their father has been on claim for 15 years. Fortunately, they had a long-term care policy, and they said it was the best investment they ever made. This is a picture of Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett also has long-term care insurance. And people go, gosh, well, why does someone like Warren Buffett need long-term care insurance? The reason why is he understands the benefit of leveraging an insurance company's dollars. You can get up to 3 times the coverage For instance, if you put $50,000 towards a long-term care policy, you may end up with $150,000 worth of long-term care benefits. And if you're currently age 65 and purchasing a long-term care policy, what's the likelihood of tripling your dollars between now and the time you need that care 20 years out at age 85? You're probably not going to triple your money during that time frame, which is why people like Warren Buffett self-insure. And so it's really important to ask yourself these questions. Do you have an age gap with your spouse? Is one spouse significantly healthier than the other? And can you lift your loved one, whether it be a spouse or a parent, can you lift them into the bathtub? Those are the questions that people ask themselves before they look at long-term care.
And just one clarification, Warren Buffett has long-term care insurance. You said he's self-insured.
No, I'm sorry, he has long-term care.
Yes, and here's another way to look at it, and because I'm going through this with my wife right now and her parents, is she says, okay, my parents make this much per month in retirement, and their expenses are this much, and the expenses are more, and they have this much money saved up. And it's kind of like gas in a tank. And so it's really, there's so many variables here. I think one great way to look at it is if you knew you were going to take a drive and you didn't know how long that drive was going to be, would you want more gas in your tank or would you want less gas in your tank? So you can think of long-term care insurance as adding gas to the tank. And so that's how I think of it.
Exactly. So what I'm going to walk through is a couple different case studies. And Jim, it looks like we might have a question from someone in the attendees.
Yeah, if one spouse is older and most likely to need care and the wife have a prenuptial and have never married their money or put it together, should they get a divorce? So the response, no, should they get a divorce? I'm a fan of marriage. I've been married 27 years. You don't need to get divorced. I think that's an old way, an old approach. There was kind of this quirk in federal law that's kind of been cured. You're probably better off staying married and not getting divorced and considering long-term care insurance.
And you can also segregate certain assets as joint, even if you have a prenup. So what we're going to walk through is a couple of case studies. And the old way of doing long-term care insurance was very common to do a use it or lose it policy, where you pay an annual premium, and if you never need any care benefits, those premiums are lost, often very much like a homeowner's policy or an auto policy. If you don't need it, you don't get any of those premiums back.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. What I'm going to walk through is some of the more modern versions of doing long-term care insurance. Here's our first case study. We have a joint, we're going to go back one slide here. We've got a husband and wife, male is 61 and the female is 60. What they decide to do is they take $125,000 that they've got setting in a checking account, not earning any interest, and they decide to earmark that for their cost of care needs in retirement. That then provides each of them $74.32 per month per person, with a 3% annual inflation adjustment. So that means each year, $7,432 with a 3% inflation adjustment. So it will be worth more coverage when they could need care 20 years from now. If they never need the care, it will provide a $247,000 death benefit to their heirs. During the first 33 months, they will use that $7,432 per month per person. And if they fully use that 33 months, there is no residual death benefit. However, that money that it covers of $7,432 per month per person will be paid for a lifetime. So that means if you have someone that has Alzheimer's and is in a care facility for 15 years, they will receive that benefit unlimited until they pass away. The next case study we're going to look at is Annie. She's 66. She decides to write a check for $50,000 And with that $50,000, she ends up getting 3 times the benefit in long-term care. So she now has a bucket of $150,000 to use for in-home care, assisted care, skilled nursing care. She can also have respite care if she decides to have a caregiver that she, a family member provide her care. This policy would also provide relief or reprieve so that her caregiver can have a break. If she never uses this long-term care, then that $50,000 is growing at a guaranteed interest rate and will go as a death benefit to her trust.
So you write a check for $50,000, you get $150,000 coverage, and if you never use it, that $50,000 plus interest goes to your kids or whomever.
That's correct. And this is just the data to show that illustrated. Currently, it's a guaranteed interest rate of 2.75% per year, which is certainly more than a CD is paying at the bank. If she needs access to that money, after 7 years, she can access some of that money without any penalty. She would reduce her benefit, but she does have access to that money. So it's great to earmark money that you have sitting in a CD earning nothing, to earmark that and leverage the insurance carrier's dollars. The next case study that we're going to look at is Betty. She's age 62. What Betty decides to do is spend $1,000 a month for the next 5 years. She's going to retire at age 67. And so during her high income earning years, her kids are now out of college. She is going to put $1,000 a month towards funding her long-term care, so that when she retires, she's got no future premiums. She's going to pay that $1,000 a month, and it's going to give her a bucket of benefits of $206,000. That is a death benefit. That is a permanent death benefit. If she never needs care, that $206,000 will go to her heirs. And if she does need long-term care benefits, she can access 25% of that amount. She will be using the death benefit during her lifetime, tax-free, to cover her cost of care. The other thing with this type of policy is it is an indemnity reimbursement. What does that mean? Some policies are reimbursement only. They will only reimburse what your billed cost of care was from a nursing home or caregiver. Some policies, you can use the money for whatever you need as long as your doctor has said you're in need of care. So if they need to take out $25,000 to put in wheelchair ramps in their home, they can do so.
That's on an indemnity policy.
That's on an indemnity policy.
So it's better. Indemnity is better.
It can be. Okay. It can be. And so what we're going to look at next is, first I want to stop here for just a quick second. This is an illustration to illustrate Betty putting in $1,000 a month for 5 years. If we look at the top circle, the guaranteed rate on that $12,000 each year, she's going to be guaranteed to earn interest on her money at no less than 2.5% per year, plus gaining some upside growth potential and interest based on the S&P 500. If she ever needs access to that cash, she can tap into that cash account value tax-free. She would reduce her benefit slightly, but that money is growing and accessible to her while still maintaining a benefit. The next case study we're going to look at is Carol. And Carol is 62. She has $100,000 that she decides to put into the policy while she's healthy. She knows she's going to get a guaranteed rate of return of 2.5% a year. And she also, that $100,000 gives her a $230,000 permanent death benefit. If she never needs care, that goes to her heirs. If she does need care, she can use 25% of that per year. This is a unique policy. This is one of a few policies out there. You can never get coverage when you need care. It's like trying to get auto insurance after you've had a crash.
It
doesn't work that way. But this is one of the policies, because she got the policy when she was healthy. She can then later add to it, and she can add up to $250,000 per year, up to $1 million. Carol's now 75. She has Alzheimer's, and she is now going to need care for probably several years. She decides to drop in another $100,000 into this policy, and she's going to get the original roughly 2 times benefit that her death benefit is covering her for. She's going to now have over a $400,000 bucket to pull benefits from, and those come out tax-free. So that's the benefit of these types of newer policies. And this is the data to go with it, which we can get into details if this is an appropriate policy for someone. I'm going to jump ahead to our last case study, which is Debbie. And Debbie decides to repurpose an old life insurance policy. This is a case that Jim and I are working on right now. It's a mutual client, and Jim's doing their living trust. We helped do a comprehensive review for her. And what we looked at is she has an old State Farm policy. And this policy was taken out when she was a single mom. Her son, she wanted to provide a death benefit for. She had a $50,000 life insurance death benefit. And she wanted to make sure that he could have some money to cover the mortgage. Well, now she's 64. She has no mortgage. Her son is grown. She doesn't really need this policy anymore, but she's going, what do I do with it? It's accumulated $17,000, and I just don't want to get rid of it. What we did was we took that $17,000, we put it into a new policy that gives her twice as much death benefit. She's now got a $100,000 death benefit, of which she can use $4,000 per month towards long-term care. And she is using the death benefit while she's living, but she's using it for her needs tax-free. And it's only going to cost her $81 a month, which is $6 more than what she was already paying. So this is an example. She's paying $81 a month. She's transferring her existing policy's value over and getting twice the benefit. So we can also look at repurposing an existing life insurance policy. One of the last things I'll highlight is we can repurpose a non-qualified annuity. A non-qualified annuity means a non-retirement annuity, something outside of an IRA. This is something that if you put in $100,000 maybe 10 years ago, and now it's worth $200,000, that $100,000 gain would have to come out as ordinary income tax. It's very much like an IRA. It's growing tax deferred. It's money that you've never paid tax on. Well, what we can do, if you're not using that annuity for other things, we certainly wouldn't want to touch an annuity you're using for retirement income. But if you have an annuity that's not being used in your portfolio, we can repurpose that and transfer it into a long-term care annuity. And anything that comes out of that $200,000 value comes out tax-free. And you might even be able to get more than the $200,000 value in long-term care benefits, but no ordinary income tax. This is due to the Pension Protection Act of 2006. So rather than liquidating an asset, when Jim mentioned what's that first asset you're going to liquidate, the rental home has capital gains tax, your annuity, you have ordinary income tax. This is an asset you can repurpose and pull out tax-free.
You know what I love about this strategy is this is an example why you really need to pay attention to your estate plan and your finances, okay? Because the law changed in 2006. Before 2006, you just couldn't do this. But now you can take this annuity that's not in an IRA and put it into a long-term care wrapper of an annuity, and then your distributions, when you go to pay for long-term care, you're not paying tax on it. That's pretty cool.
That's correct. And the other thing is that $200,000, I'm using this as an example, but if that annuity is worth $200,000, it may be able to get us $400,000 worth of long-term care benefits. So there are various versions of policies out there, and that's why it's important to have a review and figure out a tailored solution for you. So just to kind of sum up all of our options for long-term care, there is still those standalone long-term care policies. Those are the use it or lose it policies where you pay an annual premium. Those premiums could rise. I'm not stating that those are bad policies. If you have one of those policies and you've owned it for 10 or more years, it's more than likely still beneficial to hold on to that policy. We could, however, supplement that with an additional policy. There's another policy that's like a linked CD, which is the one where we had the example of putting $50,000 in. It's growing at 2.75% per year. It gives you a 3 times bucket of benefits to use for long-term care. It's not a use it or lose it. The other policy is a life insurance policy where you can use your death benefit while you're living tax-free for long-term care. And if you don't ever need it, there's a death benefit that goes to your trust or your heirs. One of the last things I'll highlight is who should use long-term care. And those that are age 50 to 85, and 50 is a soft number. There are some people we can, say would be appropriate for a 40, 45-year-old policy, just depends. But this is kind of the average, is 50 to 85. You did not used to be able to get a policy up to age 85 5 years ago. There are now carriers that will underwrite a policy up to age 85. The other thing that I want to highlight is if you were denied by a carrier 10 years ago for long-term care because you might have had breast cancer or you might have type 2 diabetes, there are carriers that will now underwrite those medical issues. And if you are cancer-free more than 1 year, there are some policies available to you. So if you were previously denied or not sure if your health would allow you to qualify, it's worth discussing if there is a policy available to you. And so those that currently don't own long-term care and would consider themselves a self-funder, if they have liquid assets that they're not using that are earning less than 2% at the bank, we can look at those assets, and also those clients that now have required minimum distributions. Some people are being forced to take out more money than they need out of an IRA or a 401k. We can look at earmarking some of that income to buy a policy.
And I want to thank Christina, I want to thank Jim and everyone for attending today's webinar. Just to note, you will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. And just to note, our office is open until 5 p.m. this evening for those of you who have immediate questions or want to schedule a free consultation. On behalf of Cunningham Legal, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.